Hello, everyone, and welcome to my first ever in my life tutorial, where I'm gonna teach you how to edit some of my photos. I've been kind of teasing a little bit about this on Instagram and Facebook and stuff, that I wanted to show you guys how to edit photos. Well, how I edit my own photos. So yeah, I just decided to, what the hell, let's get it done, record it, and see how it goes. By the way, where I'm staying now, it's some Airbnb that there's a little bit of construction going on, so you might hear some weird drills maybe happening here and there. So yeah, just bear with me. So anyways, I'll keep this short and simple. I don't want to go a ton into detail because this is more like an intro, so you see the process of some of the photos that I do, just so you kind of get a glimpse into it. And I'm thinking of doing more in-depth videos later on, which will be, like more specific to different things. And I think for those, I'll ask you guys what you want to learn, or what you want to see, and then we'll go from there. Okay. So anyway, let's get started. So right here. Oh, by the way, you can see my cursor, like the arrow is quite big. It's not that I'm 80 years old, but it's just I made it bigger so you guys could see it better. Anywho, so yeah, so this is one of the photos that I just did for a client. You may have seen it on social media, posted about it. They're called Made Juice, and they are an Australian juice brand that I just recently worked for. Their packaging is really cool. Their juices are very colorful, and when I talked to the brand director and the graphic design company that is handling them, which is Glassford and Walker in Vancouver. They wanted to, connect some of the colors on the product itself to the photo shoot, and they had seen some of the work that I've done before with like these crazy, colored shadows and everything. So they wanted some of that. So why am I mentioning all of this? It's just because, just so you know that every time I'm editing a photo, or for that matter, anytime you should be editing, you are editing a photo, you should be remembering this talks that you have with your clients, and like the kind of like the story behind it, right? Because if you have an image like this, this really bright green juice, and then you end up getting something that is a little bit more desaturated and neutral, it kind of disconnects with the final goal, which would be that you wanted something bright and poppy and colorful. So that's just something to keep in mind. I sometimes write it down on my notes, so I remember throughout the process to like continue to have this like aesthetic throughout every photo, right? So it looks consistent. So that's just a little bit of background, just what happens before I edit the photo. So with that in mind, like I was saying, that we wanted to make it colorful and poppy and etc. This is the final product here. So you can see that's the before and that's the after. So there's not a ton of variation because, the lighting is there, the colors are there, but we do see here, which is the before, there's like a little bit of like dirty parts here. There's a little bit of a reflection there. The colors are nice. There's some colors in the shadows and they're in the background, but it's not really popping as we want to, right? So in here, which is the final version, the shadows are really green. They're very bright, which is what I wanted. I cleaned up some of those reflections, some of those dirty spots on the glass. And I also kind of made a little bit of like, you can see here better. See, there's like it looks muddy here in this area. You don't know, it's like green, grayish. But here, I added a little bit of a gradient color to connect back with these shadows. And then I made it a little bit slightly more blue, or actually a little bit, more like tealy blue in this area. So that's a little bit of what I did. As you can see in this area here, these are all my adjustments. Now, I know, I'm not gonna, that's one thing, I'm not gonna go over like what each adjustment is in Photoshop. I think there's a million videos to learn Photoshop, so I'm just gonna jump straight up. I don't know, just jump into what I do with each of these adjustments, right? So let's deconstruct this right now. I'll start with this. So let me turn off all these layers here and I'll explain a little bit of what each layer is. And then I'll try to replicate it on a separate document so you see it. So the first layer that I added to all of this was just a regular, just adjustments color, adjustments of color, right? So you can see there, I brought it up a little bit more. And what I used for that was, and let's jump into this document here, which is ready. I like to use here in the filters, I like to use the camera raw filter, which is basically, you know, a lot of people say like, oh, you use Photoshop, I use Lightroom because, you know, you can work in raw files, or I use, what is a bridge, and then I send it to Photoshop. So this is basically the same thing. When you put a filter and then you put the camera raw filter, you are working with the raw file and it's adding that filter onto Photoshop. I'll talk about it more in depth in a different video, I guess, because I really like using this filter, and this is where I do some major adjustments. You could also use, if you are not using the filter here for the camera raw filter to adjust your colors, you could also use just, you know, the auto tone adjustment, which is pretty disgusting in this case, or the auto color, which is also pretty nasty because it's getting rid of all the nice green that we have there. You know, sometimes it works actually. Like I usually go here and try it first, and then if it works, ooh, great. And then, you know, I move on to other adjustments. But a lot of the times Photoshop doesn't know what you're doing, right? Like Photoshop doesn't know that I want to keep these green shadows, these colors and everything. So what Photoshop is trying to do is make everything perfect, you know, like, so that's why it catches a lot of green in the screen. I press auto tone and it's making it a little bit purple, if you see, you know what I mean? Because it's like, oh my God, that's so green. Let's add a shit ton of purple to, you know, balance it. So no, thank you Photoshop, but that's not what I want. Anyways, so let's go back to what I actually did. So like I said, I put a filter and then I went to camera raw filter and then I adjusted the colors in here. You know, a little bit of my guide in this area would have been this label. This label is looking a little bit maybe too green. So then I went with my dropper, which is again not working, is gross. So I just started manually doing it, you know, by almost like how the feel of it. One thing I want to mention is don't get stuck too much on like, well, this is my way of editing. I don't get stuck on like, this has to be perfect white. Yeah, sure, this is perfect white right here. As you can see in the settings over here in this area, when I hover over, see it's like 219, 219, 220. That means it's almost perfect white. That's awesome, but look how gross everything else looks. So don't get too caught up on having perfect everything. Is mostly about the goal and the feeling of the photo, right? So as long as it looks good and it feels good and it achieves the goal that your client wants, that's all good. So let's go back to that. So like I said, my dropper here for white balance didn't work. The auto tone didn't work. So I'm gonna do this manually, which is the case a lot of the times with photo shoots that use crazy colors like this. You kind of have to do it yourself because auto corrections don't work. So, you know, in this case, I want to make it a little bit greener, like I said. So I'm gonna make it, this is the original. Let's go back to 0. That's the original. I want to make it a little bit greener. So if I go to blue, that washes it out. If I go to yellow, it makes it a little bit brighter and greener. And obviously, I don't want to add more magenta because that will get rid of the green. So I add a little bit more green in here, right? So there we go. It's a little bit of a difference. And then you press OK. And then, so you can see already there's a difference there, right? Then you can go back if you like it and continue to work again within these adjustments, the filter, the camera raw filter, and do other adjustments like, you know, your contrast, maybe add more blacks, maybe add some clarity, which is, I find this is a very useful filter because the actual clarity control does not exist, at least that I know of. On Photoshop, you have to do a bunch of things in Photoshop to get that clarity. So it's easy to just come here and add clarity as you want. So, you know, maybe I'll add some more contrast here, a little bit more blacks, maybe bring out the whites, not so much there. And again, there's many other adjustments here that I won't go over because this is going to take forever. But anyways, here, for example, you can change the highlights for color balancing, blah, blah, blah. But let's just make this quick and easy. So again, see, a nice little pop. So that's the before and that's the after. Let's go back to my original document. That's the before, that's the after. So it's not too far off, right? There you go. It's not too far off from what I had. So that's what I did first. Now, the second adjustment that I did on my document was, as you can see here, I think that's my arm. And I don't know what that is, but the juices are really nice, but the bottle is looking a little bit dirty. There you can see the table, etc. So, I really kind of want to make it a little bit cleaner in that sense. So as you can see, I'm cleaning up this area here and this area here. I didn't go too crazy in this one. I didn't want to get rid of, for example, this whole table in this one specifically because I wanted to look a little bit more kitschy, you could say. But you could go ahead and also delete this area and make it all even if you want. I actually did it for a few of the other photos of this same photo shoot, but for this one specific, I didn't. Now, I'm not gonna go into crazy detail. These two little layers are at video on their own to match texture and color, but I'm just showing you that, it is doable and it works really well. I know a lot of fashion fashion photographers use this for people, for skin, for pimples, pores, or fabric, anything that needs to be changed in texture. I use the same technique, but I use it in food. You just have to change it a little bit of how you use it because, with food, you still want to have texture going on, like, the texture here of the juice. Whereas in skin, you don't want a lot of texture, right? You want to make it smoother. But if you have a pie, for example, and you make it smooth, it's going to look weird because you want a pie to have that like nice crunchy crust, right? Or in this case, it's juice, so you want to see a little bit of that texture. So having a completely smooth surface will look kind of weird. But anyways, so this is my adjustment layer for, cleaning up this part here. The other one is, as you can see here, if I go in closer, you're like, what is that? Why did you blur it out? So because this photo shoot, it's like I said, it was quirky, kitschy, kind of like more modern, a modern take on product photography, you could say. I want to make it look a little bit painterly. And what I do with that is I blur the textures slightly. I know I said you shouldn't blur it too much, but you can still see texture in the juice, right? Like it's not completely lost. Here you see those little dots, etc. Like it's not it's not a solid color, right? You can still see some of the stuff. So how do I do that? I'll show you here. To do that, simply I create another layer, right? From this layer, I just copy the same layer here, and then let's zoom in so you see it. And then you go again onto filter, and then you go blur, surface blur, and I choose a very, very small radius of 9 and a threshold of 3, just to have a little touch of, a painterly feeling to it. It smooths things out, like I said, for these kind of product shots. I wouldn't do this with everything. I will do this maybe with cocktails, because cocktails are a little bit more elegant and nice. But then, again, maybe with a pie or, meat, I wouldn't do that because you want to see the texture in the meat or in the pie. But yeah, so here you can see it acts a little bit as like noise filter, but it doesn't really get rid of the noise. It just smooths it out, right? So that when you come here, see, it's a little bit more smooth and painterly. In this one, you can see the effect a little bit stronger because it already had the adjustments of texture from this other layer, right? So that's what I did. And then I went ahead and adjusted further the color right? There you go. Because this, as you can see, this area here, it's a little bit too yellowy green. Doesn't look too fresh, and that looks a little bit fresh, more deep green, right? Like this juice is all about the greens. So I wanted to enhance that, and to do that, I use a selective color layer, which I'll show you here. It's this little guy here. You just press it, and obviously it lets you choose all of the adjustment colors, adjustments on specific colors on your image. It's, you know, basically a little bit of like hue and saturation. Well, no saturation. It will be more like just hue adjustments on Lightroom or anything else. But I find this one is way more specific, and it's more fine tuned and detailed, and I can control it way better than in Camera Raw or something like that. So here, for example, I will go into the greens, and you can see, you know, again, a little bit of color theory. This is looking too yellow, like I said, which is kind of reminds you of like produce going bad. So because there's a little bit too much yellow, I want to add a little bit more cyan, right, to make it a little bit more green. You could say you could add more blue, but that actually is going to cool it down. So here is, oh, actually, sorry, I made a mistake. Actually, it's magenta too. So maybe you can see it, but there's magenta, and that's what's making this look rotten, which is not, because it just was totally fine. So then you want to add more cyan to make it more green, right? And then maybe I want to enhance my blue here, which will be actually the cyan. I know it's a little bit confusing. You're like, wait, is that cyan? Oh, there you go. Woo, crazy. So, you know, I want to make it just slightly, maybe more bright like that, and then something like that, right? Don't go too crazy, because then, like, you know, colors will start looking too washed out. But, you know, again, it's just a little bit of enhancement, right? And then you can see here how it really pops, right? And then I don't think I'll adjust the green. Let me see. Hold on a second. Green. Oh, yeah, maybe it's a little bit more. And obviously, because this is an adjustment layer, maybe you don't want to have, you know, the color spilling onto the whole image, right? Maybe you just want to have it in a certain area. So then you can select it here. You can select your mask, and you can actually mask out areas that you don't want the color to be, you know, as you can see, that's kind of gross, but you can brush out the areas that you don't want this specific adjustment to be applied to. But that's what I do almost towards the end. So that will be this layer. Wait, did I get lost? Yes, I did get lost, sorry. So this adjustment here, right? Let me turn this off. Here, turn that off. Okay, there we go. So there we go. That's the adjustment. And then the next one, I believe this guy here. Yes, I know what this is. So this is, what I did is a little bit of sharpening, but it's so subtle. I don't know if you can even see it. Probably not. Well, it's very subtle. I just did a very subtle sharpening, which now that I realize, I don't know if it did anything at all. So we will talk about that later. Next layer is, let's see, what do we do here? So that one was for this little smudge that I had missed the first time, right? So I clean up that smudge. Again, I'll do another maybe video just for cleaning up stuff, because that takes quite a bit of time to explain. And then the next part here, what is this little fella? I don't even know. Sometimes, you know, I have like, it seems, no, I don't know. Sometimes I have just like remnants of like other adjustments that I didn't use, and then I don't know whether they're there, but whatever. Sorry, I don't know what this layer is, but didn't do much. And then lastly, I added a little bit more contrast. As you can see here, contrast, right? Which you can add directly through this adjustments layer here, which is bright and contrast right here. Or you can do it as we did before on your filter, and then you go camera raw filter, And then you could add the contrast in here, right? Like that, and then you can add it on. So that's pretty much it. That's how I achieved these colors. So I think it looks pretty good. I'm really happy with the results. I think it looks bright and fresh and green and very yummy. I think for the next one, guys, you can tell me if you want me to show you how to clean up files or how to work more with colors. So yeah, hopefully this video was just good to see a little bit of how I edit some of my photos. And I'm excited to do more of this for you. Thanks for sticking around and see you next time. Bye.